I'm great, George. How are you?
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Really good. You are episode number 2. Mm-hmm. I've known you for, I think, about 16, 17 years, 15, 16, 17?
Yeah, 15, I think.
15?
Yeah.
Doing your hair.
15 years.
Yeah, goes by quick. A second ago, you were talking about, you said a prayer.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. And I said, stop, don't say anything.
Don't say anything, yeah.
Wait for the podcast.
Right. Well, it was just like a quick one. It was while I was getting ready, and I just, the past several years, my life has been the surrender process. And so, and I can talk more about that, but the prayer was just a quick, it's sort of just this idea that I'm not in control. So I just hope God, the universe, power of love, whatever it is that connects us, and it can be so many different things, but I pray to whatever that is, and I just asked that whatever is said in this podcast, that my words can be guided so that it will just inspire and uplift the most people in whatever is the best way.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great prayer and affirmation.
Yeah.
It's a positive affirmation.
It's really easy for me to get in my own head and put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm the oldest. And so if I feel like I have to do this, or I have to say the best things, or I'm in charge of oh my gosh, if I don't get it right, this is going to ruin everything. It's George's second podcast and all of that. But if I just take myself out of it and I'm wait a second, this is not about me. If I ask for guidance in my words, then it's almost I don't have to do the work. I can just trust that whatever comes out is what's supposed to come out.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what has drawn me to you, and hopefully you to me, is because we connect on that level.
Yeah.
Because I feel the same way. I have a strong faith in God. I have a lot of confidence, and I feel like the things that I've set out to do in my life, I've been able to accomplish because of my confidence. And in really difficult moments, and I had one just in the last year with moving the salon.
Yeah.
There were moments where I felt helpless and I felt like I was not in control, and I just passed it off. And I said, God, you put me here, so this is on you, know? And even at moments, I got angry. I'm because you're so I felt so overwhelmed. Mm-hmm. And I feel like when I talk to God, and if I were ever to get angry at God, mm-hmm. I feel like it's okay. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I'll say the F word, and I'm effing God, come on, you know. So thanks for sharing that prayer, and I think a lot of our audience will hopefully resonate with that, and I think your words will mean a lot, you know. Mm-hmm. And my hope is that you and I can together share with people things that we've done in our lives, the obstacles that we've overcome, mm-hmm. And share with people what we do mm-hmm. on a regular basis to succeed and evolve in life. Because mm-hmm. I know that you have, I feel like I have, mm-hmm. and I think there's a lot that we can share with women and men and children to help them, to mm-hmm. inspire them. Let's begin.
All right, let's begin.
The podcast is Hair, Faith, and Confidence. I've been doing your hair, like we said, maybe 15, 16 years. What do you think kept you with me all that time? Have you had a stylist before me that you've had a long relationship with, and what was that like?
No, you are the only stylist that I've had this long of a relationship with. Mm-hmm. Especially when I first started going to you, I was mm-hmm. living at the Omega Institute, a spiritual center in mm-hmm. upstate New York. But anyway, I was on their seasonal staff. And so when I first started coming to you, I think I was making $3,000 a year. A haircut with you was 10% of my income. First of all, I have curly, I think 2A hair. And in my experience, you're the only one that has ever been able to cut it. And I think it's not that other hairstylists aren't skilled, but it's because you have this ability, I think, to listen. I can tell you what it is that I want, mm-hmm. but I think ultimately it's always, we think we want a certain thing, but really what we want is to feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And so when I describe to you what I want, it's almost like you have this ability to hear about the cut, but then also kind of gather the feeling that I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. In certain phases of my life, I've been more punk rock, and then certain phases of mm-hmm. my life, I wanted to be more professional, and in certain as I journey throughout my life, you've been able to hear, oh, okay, Melissa's kind of wanting this for like the next couple of phases. And I think that's so unique. I mean, I'm sure you're not the only person who can do it, but I think in my experience, in terms of like the stylist, like that's so unique to you. I think you have this ability to listen. And then also you're very skilled. Like, you know how to cut my hair, which is, you know, wavy and...
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think so. And I'll come back to that in a second. How do you think getting a great haircut, how has that benefited you and your confidence? You know, and how big of a part is great hair to you as a person and as a woman?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I'm going to take a breath because I do have a lot of feelings about this.
Shake it out. Shake it out.
I think, you know, this is going to be a long-winded answer, but I was teased a lot as a kid. And we moved from a very poor area where I was the smartest girl in the class and had a lot of friends, to like in middle school, like a wealthier area where we were the poorest family, and we moved into these foreclosed houses, and I got teased a lot. And I think because of that, in high school, I became very anti, in a way, like who cares about looking good? Like that shouldn't matter. What's on the inside that counts. And so for me, it's definitely been a journey, because I've learned that nothing is black and white, right? Like, yes, what is on the inside is what matters. And I do believe that as humans, we are all fundamentally equal, and it doesn't matter. You know, in this world, we live in a world that has lots of inequality, and we're born into unequal situations. But as humans, we're all the same. Because we live in a world that is not fair, that is intrinsically... I have a whole thought about our world. But anyway, because we live in a world that's intrinsically unfair, it does behoove, if the intention is to help as many people as possible, then in a way, optics can really help with that. I think Virginia, I can't remember the quote, but we can look it up. But Virginia Woolf has this great quote about clothes and how clothes matter because it's the first impression that people have of you when they see you. And so regardless, like, people won't have a chance to get to know the inside of Melissa Buckley if right off the bat they dismiss me because of X, Y, and Z. And is that about them? Of course. Yep. Is that necessarily going to help if they never get a chance to know me or to know you or to know anyone? So it's a both hand. But anyway, we wear our hair every day. And so to have a haircut that, for me especially, like, you've always given me, you know I like low maintenance hair. Time for me is a scarce resource. So I need to be able to have a haircut where I can wash, I can put some product in, I can be out the door and still feel beautiful, still feel not beautiful, like, but professional, empowered, and that there isn't anything optically that's getting in the way of me connecting with anyone that I might connect with. Yeah. And some of that's about optics, and some of that's just about feeling comfortable in my own skin. Okay, we're back. You have the quote? I found it. Would you like to hear it? I would love to. Okay. The quote is, "Vain trifles as they seem, clothes have, they say, more important offices than merely to keep us warm. They change our view of the world and the world's view of us." I love it. Yeah. But then there's a second one that I found, and I think this applies to hair too. "The connection between dress and war is not far to seek. Your finest clothes are those you wear as soldiers." So it's like this idea that, like, we're like, every day, it's not, every day isn't a battle, but in some ways every day is a battle. And like, our clothes and our hair, they're like, it's our armor, you know? Yeah. I mean, I've been a hairdresser for over 30 years, and I was trying to think about how many haircuts I've given, and it has to be over 60,000. Yeah. And so for me, having the privilege of communicating, listening to over 60,000 people, mostly women, right? To connect with them, to help them, to listen to them. Yeah. You know, and then to also learn from them and try to give them some advice through the years, because I'm just relaying information that I've heard all those years from all those women to other women, right?
but from a man's perspective. And so for me, I want to be known as someone who supports women, who helps women, who is a warrior for women, right? And I've heard the question, what about men? And I think to myself, yeah, I support all people, right?
Yeah.
But for me, the wounded child in me who unfortunately witnessed his mother being abused for many years, right? And being afraid to step in. One, because I wasn't a violent person. Two, because I was a child. But that person, that young boy within me, now as a man, I know that I can help people, and I can help them by listening to like how they want their hair to be, right? And then the people that are sitting in my chair, and how I could, while I'm listening to them, while I'm giving them a great haircut, making them feel gorgeous, right? I can also try to give them advice, to try to listen to them, to try to build them up, And to me, having a podcast and trying to reach as many people as possible, because I can only cut so many people's hair.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I've come across so many amazing women, such as yourself, and I thank you for being here, because I know that we have a strong connection. I know that you have a lot to share, and I look forward to the next hour of listening and having our audience listen to you more and listen to both of us share with one another the things that we've gone through in order to get where we're at, And I think for me, hair is the vehicle, right? I've been a stylist all these years. My faith, at times when I don't feel confident, I always lean back on God. And then again, there's confidence. And I think my confidence has allowed me to fearlessly set an intention, to create a goal, to visualize that goal, to say it in first person. Like for years I said, I am a salon owner.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden, 4 years later, I opened my first salon, George the Salon in River North, in Hubbard. That's where I met you.
Yeah.
And I've continued to grow and to expand my company with the product line I Am Gorgeous. And then we built out a new salon this past year. After 10 years in our gorgeous salon on Oak and Rush, we moved, and I'm expanding even more. I've been lucky enough to purchase a colleague, Paul Rader Salon. He has 2 locations, one in Chicago, one in Winnetka. So
Nice.
I'm very excited about that. I'm going to triple my staff,
Wow.
triple the revenue.
Wow.
And so for me, this podcast, again, is another avenue for me to hopefully inspire and bring people like yourself to our audience to help inspire as many women as possible.
That's amazing. Can I jump in with a question?
Of course.
So you said, because I heard you say it's, your confidence is something that has propelled you into some of the success that you're having and speaking in the first person. What do you mean by confidence? What does that mean to you? And where do you think your confidence comes from?
That's a great question. Thank you. And I've heard that question before. A few things. One, I feel like the first 6 years of my life were so impressionable. I was surrounded by my mother, 3 aunts, many cousins, my grandmother. I lived with my grandmother for a few years before she passed away. I think all the love that I felt, all the comfort and the warmth and the security that I felt as a young boy, I think that's a huge part of my confidence. But I also think I was born with it.
Yeah.
Maybe it was God-given. But I think there definitely has been times when I've maybe questioned things, and I know that I've learned that talking in the first person, as if it already happened, is a way to create a feeling, to create something that maybe you don't have. Like for me, if I wasn't confident, I would say to myself, I am confident.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I've heard that question before. I gave a client advice once because I think she was talking about being in love. And I said, well, just say I'm in love, or feel what that feels like. And she's like, well, I don't know what that feels like. And I said, well, imagine what that feels like.
Wow.
What do you think that feels like? What do you want it to feel like?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so write it on a piece of paper. I am loved. I'm in an amazing relationship, or I have this job or this career, or I have a beautiful family, you know, a beautiful house. Whatever it is that you want, I would tell people, write it down. I am, you know, such and such. And then, you know, say it to yourself over and over and over again, and feel that feeling. You have to feel that feeling in the moment, right? Because in your subconscious mind, you kind of play a trick on it, and then all of a sudden, if you're consistent enough and like you never give up on the idea that you're going to gain that in your life, in my opinion, you will receive that, you know? One last thing that you have to also do, like what I would do is give gratitude. Give gratitude. So almost like you're giving gratitude to something that you're sort of saying that it already happened, right? So if you're saying thank you for me having a salon, if I said, you know, thank you for this salon that I have, even though I didn't have a salon, I believe that's how I manifested opening up a salon. So, I don't know if that, I mean, that's a lot too, but.
No, it makes a lot of sense. It sounds like it's a combination of affirmations, but then also, and I really think it's interesting how you talk about the feeling. It's almost like, why do we want anything? Because we think it'll make us feel a certain way, right? And so if we can connect, it sounds like for you, some of the process is about connecting to the feeling and really, really, really maintaining that feeling, and then to the point where it's so present that it's easy to give gratitude for the feeling because it feels familiar. Is that sort of?
Yeah, I mean, you're saying it as if it already happened. You're believing that it will happen. You have faith or confidence that it will happen. And then the feeling is just, what do you think it feels like to own a salon? What do you think it feels like to be in love? What do you think it feels like to have children? What do you think it feels like to live in a beautiful home? There are definitely things, unanswered prayers, for instance, right? I think for me, my view is that if you're serving others while you're serving yourself, if you're on the right path, I think that things will come to fruition, you know? I mean, I think the things that you need to focus on is try to have goals or intentions that are realistic to a point, you know, but always try to challenge yourself. And every step of the way, things are going to be difficult. You know, you're going to get stuck in the mud. You're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel burnt out. You're going to feel like it's impossible, you know? But if you just keep digging, keep fighting, keep intending to receive it, you know? If you're working towards a goal, you got to keep working at it. And my thing is, one, failure is never an option when it comes to business and in relationships. And two, if you didn't get it yet, you're not done yet. And so for me, I've set goals in my life, simple goals. If I have to die trying, I will. You know, if I'm 90 years old, you know, trying to accomplish a goal, so be it. You know? So I don't know if that answers your question, but you know. And I want to talk about Melissa.
No, I know, but I think it's really, I just want to say one thing, which is actually just clicking for me again in a new way, but just to hear you talk about it, I heard you say service to others, service to others. So it sounds like, you know, you obviously have had a lot of success, and you have your own salon, and now you're expanding your salon, and it's going to affect more people, and the podcast is going to reach more people. And from what it sounds like, you know, your history from when you were younger and wanting to help women, you started this conversation saying, I want to help women, I want to connect women, I want to be an advocate for women. Everything that you have done in your life, it's sort of underpinned by this desire to help others. It's service to others. I didn't hear you say, you know, I want to live in a big house so I can show off, and you know, and I don't know that that's necessarily, nobody's perfect. We're all human. We all like to have nice things, and like, it sounds like everything all of your successes have helped you to be more of service. And so I wonder, at least for me, I could be projecting a little bit, because I think for me, transitioning from a self-gratifying mindset to a service-minded mindset has really been like very instrumental in my life. Just satisfaction and a lot of other things. So
can you repeat that? Have you been working on self up until this point?
So about 5 years ago. And even since I knew you, when I met you, I had, I was $3,000 a year. I was not in a relationship. I was dating a bunch of bad boys. I had never had a professional job. I don't even think I had graduated from college yet. I was maybe like 26 or 27. I had a 4-credit independent study outstanding at American University, still do, that I constantly lied about. And and I wanted a professional job. I wanted money. I wanted a relationship. I wanted how all these things seemed impossible. And so over the years, like using various techniques, graduated college, got a job, relationship, all this stuff. But what ended up happening was at some point I accomplished like 5 or 6 goals that I thought were impossible. And I still was internally unsatisfied, and I still felt like something's missing, like this. It's not going to make me happy, because I thought graduating college would make me happy, and then it didn't. And then I thought, getting a job would make me happy, and it didn't. And I thought getting a house would make me happy. And so none of the externals. And that's when I really started meditating every day. If I continue to try to drive my life based on my own setting goals for myself and achieving them to try to make myself feel better, I would just be caught in this cycle of setting goals. At some point about 5 years ago, I shifted my focus. Instead of, okay, what will make Melissa Buckley happy? The question became, how can I use my innate gifts and talents to be of service to the world in a way that will uplift others and bring me joy?
Yeah.
When my life brought me to that point, it was like everything changed, and just life became more full and better, and I don't have this like dissatisfaction regardless of what's going on anymore, because I feel buoyed by this confidence that because it's not about me, I don't need, what do I need, what am I gonna do for myself at this point that's gonna really make it better? The only thing that truly brings joy is the moments where I feel like connected to others, where like, where I'm being supported, where others are supporting me, and where I'm supporting others, and the innate gifts and talents that I was born with into this life by God or the universe, whatever, are being put to good use. And so for me, that has been like incredible. And I think maybe that is one of the reasons why I've always been drawn to you, because it sounds like you've had that, like you've had this service-minded mindset, whether you've known it or not, that has underpinned a lot of the goals that you've set in your life.
Yeah.
Would you agree, or?
Yeah, totally. I think for me, having this burning desire to help my mother, and I think being a hairstylist is so connected, right? Because at 18, I was able to just connect with women to try to help them, to try to make them feel good, right? After years of seeing my mother in pain, right? And so, for me, having a job as a young guy and having a career, it helped give me guidance, gave me a clear path, and it gave me freedom, right? Because for me, again, as a young kid, we moved around a lot, and I didn't really have any control. I wasn't in control of really anything. And so for me, having a job that I loved, it sort of gave me freedom to create my own destiny, to be in control. We moved around a lot. We lived in like small, little crappy apartments. And the one thing that I've always wanted was a beautiful home, right? And I got it. I mean, I live in a beautiful home. And I really I've lived in like I said, a crappy little house 2.5 years ago. So it was like this pattern, right? I was okay with it. My wife hated it, but I had a plan, right? George had a plan. But it was weird because with the house, I felt comfortable. I felt in a weird way, I felt comfortable in this crappy little house, probably because of childhood stuff. Like not, work was one thing, professional life was another. And so getting close to turning 50, I was like, finally, I'm okay with, like, I want a nice house, like I'm ready for it. But talking about serving others, right? So, a story that I can tell about my wife and our home, in our last home. If my wife, if my wife talked about the house that we lived in, and she was very embarrassed of it, she hated it, and I took it so personal, right? And we would argue about the house, or I would get so defensive about this house. And this is a clear moment, and I'll never forget it. It was during COVID. I had moved exercise equipment into the garage, and my wife and I were arguing or something. I was in the garage working out. My wife came into the garage upset about the house or something that had to do with the house, or she just wasn't happy in that moment. And I'll never forget, she got in her car, she closed the door, and she was still yelling while I was working out. And in that moment, instead of hearing her and being defensive, I just saw her face and the pain that was behind the words about the home. And I knew in an instant, like, we had to get out of here.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? Like, and we lived there for 10 years, and I was like, I got a plan. We're gonna tear this house down, you know? And I know that for me, talking about childhood trauma or wounds, that I'm sure we all carry, right? And I think committing to something, committing to a career, a job, a relationship, any kind of passion, something that you commit to is the only real way to grow, And so in the arguing with my wife and the connection that I had with her and seeing her pain, I knew that I had to change that. And I did, right? We moved out within 6 months,
The question is kind of back to like when you were asking about, have I been with the hairstylist for this long? 15 years, and why I've stayed with you the whole time, and how you have this ability to hear the feeling I want and then translate the direction I'm giving you and combine it with the feeling and then produce something for me that is exactly what I wanted, but I didn't know is what I needed to happen. And so I guess my question for you is, do you ever feel, because I heard you say you want to hear women and listen to women, and then also you want to share advice because you've received so many stories and have advice from other women that you can pass along to other women. Is it ever challenging, or how do you navigate the balance between listening, like for me, listening to what I want, receiving what I think I want? If I say, oh, George, I want a Taylor Swift haircut, look at these photos. Knowing from your experience, she thinks she wants this, but I'm also hearing she wants to feel like this. And I know from my experience what actually needs to happen is this. Do you ever consciously have to navigate that, or do you ever find it challenging, or do you just kind of go?
And you're asking me, like, when I'm going to cut someone's hair, basically?
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Like, how do you navigate that as a style? You do it so well, and so I'm curious if it's difficult.
I think for me, I didn't play around with dolls, when I was a kid. And so when I went to beauty school, it was just because I felt like it was the right thing to do, right? I was always into my own hair. I didn't even think about the fact that I was going to be with women all day when I decided to go to beauty school, even though it was a benefit. I think sometimes we're drawn to certain things, and I think for me and for people out there, being in tune with your feelings and intuition and listening to that is so important, right? Because, and I'm going to drift off for a second, setting our goals need to be based on what we feel we need or want, right? And some of that stuff is going to be to help us heal our old wounds, but also to take us to accomplishing goals or having the home or having the house or the family, whatever it is that we really want. it can't be about having something superficial, in my opinion. But, so for me, being a stylist, I think it was part of my destiny, right? Again, being really good at listening to women and having been around so many women cutting their hair, I've been able to pick up on what people want, right? Again, because I didn't know a lot about women's hair. And I went to a good beauty school, but it wasn't like I was trained so much that I was trained to only do certain things a certain way. And so for me, because I was so curious and I wanted to really make people so happy, I asked tons of questions from every client that sat in my chair. I would say, tell me about your hair, what do you want? What has worked? What hasn't worked? And again, I think for me, having a lot of confidence, and I was lucky enough to get clients returned to my chair, and I think this really helps me, is that I'm okay with hearing the bad things, right?
Yeah.
And I think what I've noticed is that if I ask someone about their last haircut, and they'll say, maybe they would say, it was good, And I've heard other stylists say, oh, okay, great, let's do that again, huh?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, like, if someone said it was good, that means it wasn't great, right?
Yeah.
So do some follow-up questions, right? And so for me, at 18, 19 years old, cutting hair, asking lots of questions, being okay with hearing what didn't work. No, tell me, it was good? How can we make it better? Tell me, it's okay. Like, don't be afraid to hurt. You're not going to hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And so for me, again, imagine thousands of responses through the years of truly listening to people. And there definitely are patterns, certain hair types, curly hair, straight hair, wavy, short, long, textured, natural. And so for me, I think that I learned how to be a great hairdresser or great stylist because I listen. I think that has allowed me to do it. And so I'm trying to give you my interpretation of what I think you want. I would never say no. I think that's something that I never do. I would never blame something on your hair. Like, oh, well, your hair, you don't have that kind of hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man, I've heard that before too. And I'm just like, I want to hide.
Yeah.
Because for me, my job is to build people up. I think some hairdressers maybe want to break people down first. Now I have my own team, George the Salon. We have a great team. Hopefully, of people that also listen very well. But in my career, I've heard people ask and say cringe-worthy things. But again, that has helped me believe what I'm doing is working, right? Because I had great success with my clients. I've been able to have many years with certain clients, long-term clients. I value relationships. I value long-term clients and friends. So does that kind of answer the question a little bit? Or no?
George, can I say two things? Because okay, first of all, this encapsulates why I've been with you so long. The fact that you cringe when you hear you don't have that kind of hair, I think that is something that sets you apart from so many other stylists I've ever been to, because if I were to come to you and say, I want this, even if I didn't have that kind of hair, I'm quoting, even if I didn't have that kind of hair, or even if I couldn't achieve that exact look based on my hair, you, in my experience, what you would do is say, oh, okay, Melissa wants this, so what is the version of this for Melissa? And maybe it doesn't look exactly like this, but what will achieve, if Melissa looks at this and feels a certain way, what haircut within Melissa's hair will achieve that exact same feeling for her? And you've done that so well over the years, and it's so special. It gives me so much confidence. It's made, honestly, hair used to be, I was teased, like I said, and so to just not feel like I have hair, and you wear your hair every day, like I always say, but to not feel as though I have something that I can just present to the world. To go out into the world and to not have your hair be something that is detracting from your energy or focus is just amazing and incredible. It's such a gift. But then second, when you were talking about, I started to feel emotional when you were talking about how you welcome when people give you negative feedback, because I actually remember, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but I've done a lot of work around boundaries and yes and no in the past couple of years. And one of my childhood wounds was it's very hard for me to, even if it's quote unquote your fault that my hair doesn't look good because, because the hair, it didn't achieve what I wanted. And I never felt like I could go to you and say, I don't like this haircut, because in my childhood wounding, that would have been, how dare you not like my haircut? I'm George, I'm the salon owner, And even though you've never been that way for me, that was some of my childhood wounding. And I remember probably about 5 years ago, I didn't have very many haircuts from you that I didn't like, but there was one 5 years ago that it didn't hit the mark. And I remember you saying, like, I probably said something like, oh yeah, it was fine, and you questioning me on it and saying, well, fine, like, and I remember just feeling, oh my gosh, George actually cares, and you didn't get mad, and your ego wasn't hurt. And you said to me, how can we fix this? All right. And then at the end of the haircut, you said, if you don't like your hair, come back and I'll fix it for you for free. And just that, I just felt, I don't know, it was so, I never would have expected to get a free haircut if I didn't like it. But the fact that you cared so much, it really made such a difference. It was very I don't know, it was a really important moment for me. And since then I've definitely had, I've done more work on boundaries and standing up for myself and speaking. Giving negative feedback, I think, is what it is. It's hard for me to give negative feedback because of my own childhood stuff. But that was that was a big deal for me. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I mean, again, what I'm trying to do here in this podcast is try to connect with an audience in a way that I do with my clients, and so it's great. Yeah, no, it was awesome. But to be fair, that really has only happened once, I think. I think for me, and I've shared this with my team over and over again. What you see is what you get. I'm one way, whether it's with my family, my clients, my team. What you see is what you get. I care a lot about people. I care about you. I care about your hair. I care about your relationships. I care about your well-being. And I think in life, setting goals, if they're on the right path, like I was talking about before, the commitment to the goals will, one, help us serve others, but they also serve us, right? So, because we will grow through the process of giving to others, because back to the situation in the car with my wife and her being, I could just see the pain, and immediately I was like, we're getting out of here. We're getting the F out of here. We're moving, But I remember being, again, I was so defensive about the house because I felt like that was all I could afford. The house was representing me, who I was, what I had to offer. And I couldn't, again, I was too wounded to get through, to see or listen to her, because I was too focused on myself, right? And in doing so, I received the house that I've always wanted. You know what I mean? And I think life is just so magical that way, right? Yeah. It's so tricky and so complex and yet so beautiful.
Oh my gosh, I was thinking that just as you were saying it, because I heard you say earlier in the podcast, one of the things I always wanted when I was little was a beautiful house, and yet you couldn't give it to yourself. And it wasn't until you saw the pain in your wife's face that you were able to give it to yourself or give it to her and thereby receive it for yourself.
Like, oh my God.
And and that's a testament to what you also said about commitment, right? Because you were committed to your wife, and now all of a sudden more things become possible through that commitment, and you're receiving something that you wanted, but you wouldn't have ever gotten it had you not committed and had you not done it for her.
Exactly.
Yeah, right? Isn't that wild?
Yeah,
and so
it's so crazy.
Is this like I don't know. I mean, it's just validating for me. It really is the service mindedness of
when you give, you receive, you know?
And I agree. And we hear that in life. And though, I'm pointing at my head, it's something that's easy to know, but
To apply it.
Yeah, to apply it, to have the lived experience, to hear about a lived experience in which that actually happened, I think is really cool, because it brings it to another level.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
We've talked so much already about hair. I think a lot about confidence. We did touch on God. You talked about God, the universe, this power. I would just say within that realm, what's your background? Do you pray?
Yeah.
How has God been a factor in your life?
Yeah.
Or a universal power?
Yeah.
I'm not here to talk about religion or scripture.
Yeah.
But I am going to talk about God, and I, God could be made up.
Yeah.
Right? I believe in the power of prayer. So whether God exists or not, and I've seen a lot of little videos on atheists, and I think sometimes with that, I think that they're searching for someone. They're searching for someone to challenge them so that they believe. You know what I mean? And I'm so lucky that I could lean on God or the idea of God, because when I'm down, when I'm going through something that's really, really difficult, like I said before, I pass it off. And I'm like, God, help, I need help.
Yeah.
And I've always gotten it.
Yeah.
So how does God play a role in your life?
Oh, absolutely. I love this question. And I think I have a lot of thoughts on it. So I grew up Catholic, and I remember always kind of being confused about how can a loving God send people to hell? How can a forgiving God send people to hell? That just did not make sense to me. But I was so scared of going to hell that I didn't want to explore any other options outside of the religion that I was born into for a long time, because it's scary. Like, who wants to be live in eternal damnation? And I remember when I was 18, I met a Buddhist who went to James Madison University, and I also came in contact with this book in a bookstore that was called Conversations with God. It's by this guy called Neil Donald Walsh, and it was the first book that I had read where this guy Neil Donald Walsh has an actual conversation with quote unquote God. And I remember reading it, and so much of it resonated with me. And at that point, I just remember praying to Jesus Christ, the God that I knew up until that point, okay, I really need to, I'm feeling really called to look into these other options. And I just pray that if
it was okay.
Well, yeah, if I really do need to, only believe in you, just before I die, please bring me back, because I don't want to go to hell. And I laugh, but actually even that was faith, right? That was okay, I have faith that if there is a God and it has to be done a certain way, that hopefully there's enough love that I will be brought back to before I die. But since then, I haven't really, my idea of God has expanded. And I don't know that I have I think, in this reality, we have 5 senses. So there's so much more going on than we have ability to perceive. And so I think it's hard to kind of define. But I think there is love, which, there's some type of energy, even if it's just love, that connects all humans together. And so whether it's a God, whether it's love or an energy, whether it's like, I think there's, our highest self. There's so many different ways to define it, but I do think there, at some level of reality, there's oneness. And from the perspective of oneness, so many things probably make sense. Like, we don't have oneness perspective, right? You only have this perspective of George looking outward. So you can't possibly know how all of your decisions or choices are going to affect the people around you. But I think this oneness has that universal perspective. And so it's surrendering to the oneness is like, hey, I don't have the full perspective as Melissa Buckley, so I could think I want something, but this oneness is actually like, no, I can see everything, and you, this is better. And I think it's just trusting that power.
I think for me, I don't think too much. I always imagine myself as a witness to the life around me. I'm definitely in. We all have free will, right? We can set intentions, we can set goals, we can reach towards those goals, we can work hard towards those goals. And I think, again, if we're focused on servicing others in connection with our goals, then yeah, great. I think that's what the universe is sort of calling us to do. I think for me, it's simple just to refer to God or Jesus. Again, I was raised Catholic as well. I'd like to say that I'm very spiritual. Meditation as a practice in my life, prayer, obviously. I think that people are looking for something, right? They're looking for answers. I think they're looking for connection. I think they're just trying to be at peace, and I think if God is the answer, great. I mean, give it a shot, you know what I mean? If meditation's the answer, I think trying to help others, I think trying to relax your mind, walking through nature, whatever it is that you can do to go through life, without anxiety, fear, pain. I think ultimately that's the goal in life. I hope that you and I both can, even with just sharing our experiences, can help people do that.
I think you bring up something I love. You brought up free will, and I have a view on free will. I agree. I think we all have free will. I think, at least in my experience, we can choose to surrender our will and ask for help and ask for guidance. Or we have the free will to just try to figure it all out on our own and just set whatever goals we want. And or set the goals that we think that we want, and not surrender to service to others or surrender to the oneness or whatever it is. And in my experience, until we willingly decide to surrender, it's just we're going to live in perpetual, because we don't have the full perspective. So it's never going to work. And at least that's what I happen to be, because I kept trying to do things and I was reaching all these goals. It's not that we can't reach goals that that aren't in service. We absolutely can. And people do it all the time, but does it satisfy them? Right? And then I don't know that we'll ever find true satisfaction until we get to the point where we're ready to surrender.
Yeah, I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm just,
That's me. That's Melissa Buckley.
Yeah.
That's
and we'll continue this conversation, right? And so for me, I just thought about, creating a product line, having a hair salon, having a nice home for myself. And in doing those things, I've been able to learn about myself, to heal my old wounds, and that I'm getting better. I think we're all getting better, hopefully. I think that's the goal.
Even for you, underlying the product line, underlying the expansion, underlying every single goal that you've set for yourself, at least from what I can hear, is this desire to help women, right? It underlies everything. So even, you're setting the goals, but underlying it is this service mentality, which is, that's just what I'm talking about. That, I think that's why it is so satisfying to you and why it does work. And
Yeah.
maybe where some of your confidence comes from, because you know that, or not, I imagine that you feel that it's because it's all to help, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which I think it does.
Thank you.
And I say one other thing.
Of course.
I wonder if you ever have thought of, I don't know if you've ever thought about this. I wonder if other stylists, or if people who want to help the world, or I think people, there could be this idea, it's like, oh, George, like, kind of like back to what I was saying in the beginning, how I was teased when I was younger. And so for a while I just rejected things like frivolity, what's on the inside that counts.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh, George, like, how could you really be helping women? You know, it's just haircuts, it's just hairstyling. Like, it's just a product line. Like that, you know,
right.
You're profiting off of, you know, this idea that we have to look a certain way to feel better.
Yeah.
And for me, it's so obvious that, at least for me, because of my experience in the world, nothing could be further from the truth. But have you ever struggled with that, or have you ever come across that, or how have you?
Yeah, no, I mean
that
I've heard that a little bit, and I've thought about that. But I think for me, I live in a world of merchandise and sales and products, and you know, as far as the products go, there's many products you can choose from, right? And so the brand I Am Gorgeous is about women empowering themselves, having a positive affirmation that they could say to themselves every single day.
Wow.
You know, we donate 10% of the net annual profits to organizations that support victims and survivors of domestic violence, which I'm really, really proud of. We have a great set of products. You know, I'm launching a shampoo and conditioner very soon, and I've worked with chemists to make sure that we're putting out amazing products that really work for people's hair, right? So, you know, with that said, if as a consumer, if there are two products to choose from, right? One has a specific name, and one is geared towards me growing as an individual.
Yeah.
And that's giving back, I'm going to choose that one.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I can't just go live in the woods, right? I'm here, I'm alive, and while I'm on this planet, I'm going to do my part. It's simple, right? I'm not like a brain surgeon, but like I'm a hairdresser. I went to beauty school. I went to high school, went to beauty school. And so I'm doing the best that I can with what I was given, plain and simple. Same thing with the salon, like, you know, George the salon, myself, my team. I think the little things matter the most. I've always wanted to create an environment that women can come to that they feel really special in, you know? So I had that. We just moved out of that. You know, and now we're in a transitional period where I bought someone's salon that I didn't design, I didn't put together. I wouldn't say it's a step backwards, because it's definitely a giant step forward, but things ebb and flow, right? And so I need to be okay with someone maybe not having the perfect experience, because the environment is something that I didn't get to create, you know, but that's part of life, you know. I think you continuously strive for more. I do, always wanting to improve, and sometimes you know, it's a step back and two steps forward. I don't know if I answered your question, but
I think so. I think you said, like, I'm doing the best with what I've been given. You don't, it's like there's so many different ways to give back and to be of service. You don't have to be a brain surgeon. You don't, And I think that is something that I just wrestled with for a long. I honestly think you were an inspiration for me in this, you know, because I remember I read There Are No Children Here. It's a book about kids who grew up, I think, in one of the Chicago projects. It was on Oprah's reading list, and I read it when I was 8 years old, and I thought, like, oh, like, this is horrible. There's so much poverty in Chicago. I need to be like a school teacher in the projects, or I felt this, like, you know, I need to help in some way. And I think for a long time, not living up to helping in the way that I felt I needed to help when I read that book when I was 8 really weighed on me. And like, the world is so complex, and seeing you and all of the ways that you create a space for women, for your staff, and how much good that does has been really inspiring. And it helps me to feel, it's definitely helped me in my own process of recognizing that, hey, you know, I was born into this life, Melissa Buckley, like I have a set of skills and talents, and they're unique to me, and they might not be, you know, I might not have the composition, or I don't know, I'm not going to be a brain surgeon, I'm not even going to be a school teacher. I remember I subbed once when I was 30 years old, and I came home and I cried every single day. It was so difficult. And that's not for me. I don't have the temperament. But that doesn't mean that as Melissa Buckley, like, I can't be of service in my own unique way. And I do think seeing you has really helped me with
Thank
that.
you.
So yeah,
That's a great compliment.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's honestly, it's
let me
amazing.
cap that off. You know, we're all given a life, one life. And I think having a life of self-service is okay, right? I mean, who says that we have to grow up and just give and give and give and give, right? Like, this is our life. We get to do what we want to do. It's our time, right? We get to decide what we want in life. You know, if you want to sail around the world, sail around the world.
Yeah.
If you want to just, you know, I don't know, like just focus on yourself your whole life, that's okay too.
Yeah.
And I think God's okay with that.
Yeah.
You know, it's our life. Again, I think through commitment, hard work, I think that it's a way to grow and evolve as a human, as, you know, as a spiritual being. And I think that helps me feel fulfilled in my life. I'm not saying that's what everyone has to do, but I think if people are feeling like they're missing something, maybe they're focusing on the wrong things.
Yeah. Maybe.
Maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe
no.
not.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Exactly.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But like, I think through meditation, I think through quieting your mind and trying to tune in, because I think we all are connected to a universal power or to God. And I think we are given guidance. You know, I've heard prayer is a moment to ask for things. Meditation is a moment to receive the answers. Right?
Wow.
As you quiet your mind, I've been given many, and I can talk about this in another, you know, episode. There's many moments where I felt, you know, like a sign, or like I've heard a word or name, or like it just comes to me. I didn't think it. It comes to me.
Yeah.
And it resonates, and it feels very powerful, and I've followed it. And in following that, following my intuition versus trying to think through a problem.
Yeah.
You know, it's about feeling, right? And I've been able to achieve what I've been able to achieve, which I believe is a good amount of success. I feel like I'm very happy. I sleep well at night. I don't have anxiety. And I've been able to sort of trust when things get really, really difficult. I feel okay.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
We
Amazing
talked a lot.
conversation.
Yeah, so much. And I knew it would be good. It was so good. Thank you.
Thank you, George.